The rain came down in sheets, streaking across the cafe window like 1,000 tiny rivers. Jacob stared through the glass, his reflection pale and tense in the evening light. He adjusted the collar of his shirt for the 10th time, then tugged nervously at his watch. He hated this. He hated the way his stomach knotted before meeting someone new. He hated how his hands shook just thinking about saying the wrong thing. He hated blind dates most of all. But what he hated more was loneliness. 7 years had passed since his wife, Emily, died. 7 years of putting on a brave face for his son, Ethan, who was now 9 years old and asked fewer questions about why mommy wasn't here but still clutched her photograph when no one was looking. Friends had nudged him, encouraged him, sometimes outright begged him to move on. "You're still young, Jake," they'd say. "You've got a lot of love to give. Don't waste it." And so, against his better judgment, he'd said yes when his coworker set him up on this blind date. The cafe smelled of fresh bread and roasted coffee beans. People chatted softly, laughter rising over the clink of cups. Jacob tried to focus on the menu in front of him, though he'd read the same 3 items over and over without registering a word. She was late. 5 minutes. Then 10. He drummed his fingers against the table, already rehearsing excuses for leaving. Maybe she wasn't coming. Maybe she saw him through the window and decided he wasn't her type. Maybe. The bell above the cafe door jingled. Jacob glanced up, and his heart nearly stopped. A woman walked in. Tall, lean, wearing a faded army green jacket that hugged her frame. Her boots were still damp from the rain. Her hair was tied back neatly, but it was her eyes that struck him most, sharp, commanding, yet carrying the weariness of someone who had lived 100 lives in one. This must be her, he thought. But then came the real surprise. 5 children followed her inside. 5. Jacob blinked hard, convinced he was hallucinating. The youngest, a little girl with dark curls, clutched the woman's hand, while 2 middle children squabbled quietly behind her. A teenage boy brought up the rear, keeping the line in order like a miniature drill sergeant. And trailing in between was another girl who dragged a stuffed rabbit by the ear, its fur worn thin. The cafe grew noticeably quieter. People stared. Some smiled sympathetically, others raised their brows. The woman scanned the room, found Jacob, and walked over. She gave a nervous smile as she adjusted the strap of her bag. "You must be Jacob," she said, her voice steady but carrying a soft tremor of nerves. "I'm Sarah. I hope you don't mind. I couldn't find a sitter." Jacob's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. For a moment he thought this was some cruel prank his friend had set up. A blind date with a soldier mom and her 5 kids? That wasn't just unusual, it sounded impossible. Still, he forced a polite smile. "Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm Jacob. Nice to meet you." Sarah gestured to the children. "These are my little soldiers." She introduced them quickly: Daniel, the eldest at 14, Lily, 12, twins, Mia and Max, who were 8, and Sophie, the youngest at 4. Each gave a small nod or shy smile, though Max immediately began fiddling with the salt shaker on the table. The group crammed into the booth, taking up nearly the whole corner of the cafe. Jacob suddenly felt like an outsider at his own table. The evening was chaos. Drinks spilled. Straws bent. Arguments erupted over who got to sit next to their mother. Sophie burst into tears when her chocolate milk came in the wrong color cup. The twins played rock paper scissors loudly enough to draw looks from nearby tables. Sarah apologized again and again. "I swear, they're usually better behaved," she muttered, wiping at a spill with a napkin. Jacob chuckled, though his heart pounded. "It's fine. Really. I have a son. 9 years old. I get it." Her eyes softened. "A single dad?" He nodded. "Yeah. Just me and him since his mom passed." Something shifted in her gaze, a recognition, empathy, a silent bond forged in shared loss. The conversation that followed was surprisingly natural. Sarah told him about her husband, who had died overseas 3 years ago. About the endless balancing act of raising 5 kids while serving in the reserves. About the guilt she carried, always feeling like she was failing someone. Jacob listened, really listened. And for the first time in years, he found himself opening up too. About Emily, about the nights he sat awake wondering if he was enough for Ethan, about the crushing loneliness no one talked about. The kids continued their chaos, but amid the noise, something unexplainable was happening. Jacob found himself smiling. He found himself at ease. When the night ended, Sarah looked at him apologetically. Most guys would have run the second they saw us walk in. Jacob grinned faintly. Most guys don't know what they're missing. That night should have been the end, a funny story to tell friends, maybe a lesson in patience. But instead, it became the beginning of something unexpected. The days that followed weren't simple. Sarah's life was a whirlwind of schedules, school runs, homework meltdowns, and last-minute military call-ups. Jacob's days were long hours at the factory, overtime shifts, and nights spent trying to help Ethan with math homework he barely understood. Finding time for each other was like catching smoke. They stole moments where they could. Coffee after work, a walk in the park while the kids ran ahead, whispered phone calls when the house was finally quiet. But as they grew closer, trust wasn't easy. Sarah's heart was still wrapped in grief for the man she had lost. Some nights, she sat staring at his photograph, guilt gnawing at her for even considering moving on. Would her children understand? Would they hate her for loving someone new? Jacob wrestled with his own fears. He'd already lost one love. What if opening his heart again only led to more pain? Could he truly step into a life that came with not just one child, but 5? And then there was the weight of judgment. Jacob's friends whispered behind his back. She's got too much baggage, one said. You'll drown in it. Sarah's relatives worried too. You barely have time for yourself. How will he fit into this? Even the kids had their doubts. Daniel, the eldest, eyed Jacob with suspicion, his arms crossed whenever Jacob came around. He was fiercely protective of his mother, and to him, Jacob was just another man who might break her heart. One evening, Sarah nearly ended it. They sat at her kitchen table after the kids had gone to bed, the hum of the dishwasher filling the silence. She fiddled with her mug before whispering, "This isn't fair to you, Jacob. You deserve someone without all this chaos. Without 5 kids, without a past that's still bleeding." Jacob reached across the table and took her trembling hand. His voice was firm but gentle. Sarah, your kids aren't chaos. They're life. They're blessings. And you, he swallowed hard, you're worth every bit of the mess. Her eyes filled with tears. But what if you regret it? I won't, he said simply. The months turned into seasons. There were fights over money, over schedules, over exhaustion that left them both snapping at each other. There were nights Sarah cried in frustration when the bills piled up, and Jacob worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. But there were also victories. Like the Saturday at the park when Ethan, shy and uncertain, joined Daniel and the others in a soccer game, and by the end, they were laughing together like brothers. Like the night Jacob stayed over when Sarah was called to duty, tucking the kids in, reading them bedtime stories, and wiping Sophie's tears when she whispered, "Do you think Daddy would have liked you?" Jacob's throat tightened. He knelt by her bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." The turning point came during Daniel's school play. Jacob sat in the audience, cheering louder than anyone, recording every second on his phone. When Daniel glanced into the crowd and saw Jacob clapping like a proud father, something shifted. After the play, Daniel approached him awkwardly. He cleared his throat, looked down, then muttered, "Thanks for showing up. Mom. Mom deserves someone like you." Those words were all Jacob needed. Years passed. Their families blended, not perfectly, but beautifully in their own way. The house was loud, messy, overflowing with laughter and slammed doors and shared meals that stretched every dollar but filled every stomach. Jacob no longer felt like an outsider. He was dad. To Ethan, to Sophie, to Daniel, to every single one of them. One evening, as the children played in the yard, Jacob knelt in front of Sarah with a simple ring. His voice trembled. "I don't just want you, Sarah. I want them. All of them. Forever." Her tears spilled freely as she whispered, "Yes." Their story is proof that love doesn't always come the way you expect it. Sometimes it comes with scars, with children, with pasts that feel too heavy to carry. But when two people choose to love not just each other, but everything that comes with them, the brokenness, the baggage, the blessings, miracles happen. Jacob thought she was joking the day she walked into that cafe with 5 kids in tow. But that joke became the greatest gift of his life. And today, whenever people ask how he does it, Jacob just smiles. Love isn't about what you can handle. It's about what you're willing to fight for. Call to action for viewers. If this story touched your heart, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Jacob's shoes? Would you have stayed on that date, or walked away? Your thoughts mean the world to me, and I love reading your perspective. And don't forget, subscribe to my channel Be Kind Always for more powerful, emotional, and inspiring stories. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who believes in second chances, and remember, no matter how heavy life feels, kindness and love can change everything.